Grand Tourers are some of the most luxurious and fast cars you can have to do amazing road trips in, and recently did a video on ones under £30,000. In that video I asked for 1,000 likes and I would make it again at a lower price range, so here we are again doing it at £20,000 instead. I hope you guys enjoy it. If you're new here, do click subscribe, it's free, and like the video as well, and I will make it maybe for under £10,000 instead if it hits 1,000 likes on this video. Without further ado, let's get into it. Even though this video is all about Grand Tourers worth under £20,000, that doesn't mean we can't get something with a Ferrari engine attached. The Maserati Granturismo has exactly that, a 4.2 litre V8 to be exact, which was at 399 brake horsepower, taking it to 60 in 5 seconds. In my last vid on Grand Tourers I mentioned the Granturismo S, which is effectively a newer, larger engined and slightly uprated version of this, but for the average person on the street it's unlikely they'd be able to tell the difference. Only when you step inside and start driving will you really see the gap between the two. It's crazy to think that we almost had a completely different car with the Gran Turismo nameplate, because the original design was actually the final design for the Ferrari California. Maserati had done the design under Fiat Chrysler, but then Fiat Chrysler gave the design to their Ferrari division instead for the Cali, and Maserati had to rapidly redesign a new car to fill their coupe position in their lineup. It actually set the record for the fastest car from design to production, and it's had a really long life, so Maserati obviously did pretty well. And it is a lovely car, looking great both outside and in, helped by the fact it was designed by Pininfarina, and the speed to market was also aided by it being built on the same platform as the Quattroporte, though I'm not sure you'd actually know that by looking at the two of them. What's also pretty impressive is how speccable it was from factory, given how quickly it went into production, so do look for an example that suits you. You'll find these listed anywhere from around £16,000, and for 20 grand you'll get yourself a 2007 model with around 70,000 miles on the clock. Those engines are actually known to be pretty reasonable on reliability, but electrics are a common problem I could find owners complaining about on forums. Last video on GTs we spoke about the DB9 and the Vantage, but for under 20 grand it's hard to get a hold of either of those. However, you can get your hand on an Aston Martin still, the DB7 instead, which comes with a couple of engine choices, most notably the 5.9 litre V12, which makes 480 brake horsepower, taking it to 60 in 4.8 seconds. Not bad for the oldest car on the list. This is unfortunately the underappreciated Aston in many ways, hence the lower prices, which came as a result of it effectively being a rebadged Jaguar project, which came from Ford's purchase of the brand. That's why it looks so much like the Jaguar XKR, which was around during the same sort of time. That plus they raided the parts bin to put this car together, which included taking the plastic inside door handles from the Mark I Mazda MX-5. Interesting that the first two cars on this list were both meant to or ended up having different badges attached. Even though it was the entry-level Aston Martin, it was still an Ian Callum design alongside Keith Helfet, the same man who designed the Jaguar XJ220, so it's actually got a good set of pens behind it, though I do always find it funny seeing those old interiors which just look way too regal for me, but I do love the British design. You'll get into one of these anywhere from around the £15,000 mark, and for £20,000 you'll be looking at a 1999 model with around 70,000 miles on it. It's worth going for the V12 as well because it was known to be a bit more reliable than the inline 6, but some remaining known problems include the excessive tyre wear from a sketchy suspension setup, cracked exhaust manifolds and warped disc brakes, and aircon requiring a very expensive repair too. If you're not fussed about hitting over 200 miles per hour and you don't mind some expensive running cost, why not step down from the Continental GT Speed we spoke about in the last GT video and get the normal Conti instead, which still has that 6 litre twin turbocharged W12 engine that makes 552 brake horsepower, taking it from 0 to 60 in 4.8 seconds. It has gone from being known as a footballer's wives car to being more well known as a cheap exotic today, and to be honest I'm not sure if I'm brave enough to go for one given the astronomical costs if they do go wrong, but I do think they make for some great YouTube content, so let me know in the comments if you think I should buy a super cheap one for a laugh. It's that or maybe a 996 C4S, I'm not sure yet, I'm just thinking about it. The intention with the Continental GT and the reason why it's so cheap today was to make a car that yes, remained a luxury car, but did away with some of the expensive practices used in previous Bentleys, like coach building, to make the car reach a wider market. It was still an expensive car on release, don't get me wrong, but it was half the price of a Continental R in comparison because of these changes, and for a car that came out in 2003 like the Granturismo, it had an enormous set of spec options to choose from, so do hunt around for one that suits your fancy. And of all the cars on this list, it might look the most comfortable cruising around Monaco on a long road trip from the UK, maybe alongside the Granturismo. You need to spend a minimum of around £11,000 to buy one of these, and 20 grand will nab you a 2005 example with around 50,000 miles on the clock. So I hope you guys are enjoying this video. A quick reminder, if you're new here, do hit subscribe and hit like as well if you want to see this video again at under the £10,000 price range instead. And in the comments I want to hear something from you guys. What are your opinions on the McLaren GT? The company that makes supercars, McLaren, they obviously did their GT. It didn't sell amazingly well. I'd love to hear your thoughts on it because I actually really like it, even though I probably wouldn't have one. We spoke about the F-Type in the last video. Well, now it's time to take a step ever so slightly down in exoticness, but a step up in engine with the XKR that has a 5-litre supercharged V8 that puts out 502 brake horsepower, taking it from 0 to 60 in 4.6 seconds. Now, with some of the different engine options like the 4.2-litre V8, these are available for under £10,000, and I think a lot of people know that, so it might not look quite as expensive as some of the other cars on this list, but I do think that shape is really nice. Again, an Ian Callum design, and I think long term the best examples might find themselves with some modern classic status. In fact, at London Classic Car Show this year, I saw a couple hanging around, so it's obviously catching a few people's attention. It actually has a similar design to the DB7 mentioned previously, and it's not a million miles away from general Aston Martin design, thanks of course to Mr. Callum, and that 5-litre supercharged V8 came in with the 2009 facelift. That engine is pretty well known, having been used in Range Rover Sport SVRs and the Jaguar F-Type since, along with a few other applications. It sounds amazing, but don't forget it's not the most economical block out there, so be prepared to get well acquainted with your local petrol station. £16,000 will get you into one of these, and 20k is enough for a 2009 model with around 50,000 miles on it. Some of the plastic around the engines on these is known to crack, which is never helpful, and temperature sensors are also known to go wrong, plus electrics have suffered gremlins according to some owners. I think that the E63 BMW M6 is a hugely underrated car, especially when everyone talks about the E60 M5, when both share the same engine, an F1 inspired 5-litre V10 which makes 499 brake horsepower, and it will do 0 to 60 in 4.5 seconds. That engine came, as I've mentioned before, from BMW's involvement with the Sauber F1 team. Remember those iconic blue and white Saubers of the early to mid 2000s? They made this possible. That's partly why it revs so high and sounds so good, especially compared to many other V10s on the market. I mean, I'm a huge Audi R8 fan, but the V10 Plus doesn't sound anywhere near as good as this engine, at least in my opinion. Let me know in the comments if you disagree. It comes as both a coupe and convertible, but either way it's completely focused on being a performance Grand Tourer with its less than reliable SMG auto box, a carbon fibre roof on the coupe to reduce weight, and a bunch of aluminium and thermoplastic parts to keep the car as lightweight as possible given its size. That carbon fibre roof was the first one on a regular production car from BMW and not a limited edition, and the previous time it was used was on the E46 M3 CSL. If you're in the US, you were blessed with 701 manual examples, which are nowhere else in the world, but they are honestly like hen's teeth, so good luck finding one. But that is properly cool, a manual 5-litre V10. These start at around £14,000, and for £20,000 you'll be looking at a 2006 model with around 50k on it. As I said, the SMG gearbox is known to be problematic, as is the Vanos system, so don't buy these for reliability purposes, buy them for the love of owning a V10. Today I would say the S63 AMG is one of the nicest Grand Tourers available on the market, but it's way out of our price range. The closest I could find for under £20,000 is the CLS63 AMG, which comes with that massive and hallowed 6.2-litre V8 engine that makes 506 brake horsepower, taking it to 60 in 4.4 seconds. This was actually the first generation CLS, but the CLS63 came in the second half of the car's existence, taking over from the CLS55 when most of the Mercedes AMG switched from the 5.4-litre V8 to the 6.2-litre block. It was actually built on the same platform as the E-Class, but actually sat above the E in the lineup, just below the S-Class. It also sits in the mid-size luxury car class, but competes with Grand Tourers like the Panamera and RS7, both of which we spoke about in the last video on GTs. Of all the cars on this list, if you were taking more than yourself and one other person on a trip around Europe, driving on some lovely roads, this would be the car for you thanks to its actually usable rear and the rear doors to make life even easier, even if the headroom isn't necessarily exceptional thanks to its fastback design. It also comes with Mercedes Airmatic suspension for an extra luxurious ride, though it's worth noting that it's very expensive to fix if it goes wrong, so many people end up swapping it out for coilovers to save a bit of cash, but then of course you also lose a bit of ride quality. These start at around the £13,000 mark, and for £20,000 you'll be getting a 2008 car that's done 60,000 miles. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. A quick reminder, thank you very much for watching, and and thank you to the patrons as always for their support. But if you want to see a bunch of sports cars you could buy for the same price range, I would click up here, and to subscribe, click down here.